I think one thing that I talk about my learnings as a VC was that, and this you'll hear from a lot of entrepreneurs that, VC don't know any, VC don't understand this, VC don't understand. I think that has to be just accepted as a matter of fact. Like a person like me sitting there at Bessemer, I personally cannot know 100 industries. I cannot associate with 100 problems. So you have to go in knowing that this guy doesn't understand it, right? And it's okay for him to not understand it or her understand it, and then you have to sort of explain it that way. So, and especially in SaaS, right, when you're building, let's say for insurance or for like like manufacturing, which is an unsexy industry, I know for a fact that I'll go talk to a VC and they will never would have stepped into a factory also. It's very, very rare that I come across a VC who's probably, has any relationship with manufacturing, or maybe it doesn't happen very often. And as I start pitching to, let's say, global investors, that will never happen essentially. So, how do you sort of, I think that is one part where I saw that a lot of pitches wouldn't, communicate that very well. As a consumer, it's still easier to relate to a value proposition. So it's easier for consumer tech startups, I think, in that sense. But for SaaS, I think it's very, very important to explain the problem and figure out what will it take for that guy to be interested. And at Bessemer, at least, we were very, very metric driven, right? And I think we published like a good, better, best of SaaS, global SaaS out there. So pretty much that's how I'm going to evaluate. So there were companies in oil and gas. I have no idea about oil and gas, but if it hits couple of those metrics, right, I am intended to learn more about the company. So that I think was one thing that I felt was missing when startups would pitch SaaS companies especially.
Hi everyone. Before we begin, I would like to share that this podcast is brought to you by Prime Venture Partners, an early stage VC fund led by Amit Somani, Shripati Acharya, and Sanjay Swami. Prime is often the first institutional investor in category defining tech startups in fintech, SaaS, healthcare, and education, such as MyGate, Quizzes, Planet Spark, Bolt, and Clip. To know more about Prime, visit primevp.in.
Hi, this is Siddharth Alwaria. Welcome to the 100x Entrepreneur Podcast. Today, I have with me Divyaanshu Makkar, co-founder and CEO of Sourcewiz. Sourcewiz is a SaaS-enabled marketplace for manufacturers, helping them streamline internal processes as well as sell better and more. Divyanshu has been a founder previously, then became a VC to see how VC sees from founders. VC sees founders, differently. How do VCs evaluate? And then he went into for a B school at University of California, Berkeley, and immediately dropped out. So it's a very interesting journey that we are going to cover. We are going to see in today's podcast how like most of the SaaS businesses today are getting started for US market, whereas the team at SourceWiz decided to focus on manufacturers, which is one of the hardest segment to crack in India because these guys operate offline, their DNA is offline. So how do you crack a business which is feet on the street? How do you build revenue in that, and how you able to get funding from some of the top tier one VCs from India? Also, 100x Entrepreneur Fund has been a very fortunate partner in SourceWiz. Uh, it's been an amazing journey. Thanks to Sajith Pai and thanks to Divyaanshu for making us part and getting us skin in the game in the journey. Divyaanshu, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Siddharth. Thanks for having me.
So, Divyaanshu, first I would like to start with your background before SourceWiz. What were you doing?
Got it. I'll start a little bit from the childhood. So born and brought up in Delhi, and I lost my dad very young, so brought up by a single mother, uh, and the goal was very simple for me. Like through college, so I went to IIT Delhi. Goal was very simple. I wanted to solve monetary issues, so I wanted to take the highest paying job and get out of college. So for me, that happened to be consulting. So I joined Parthenon Group, which is a management consulting firm. Right after college, it was based in Mumbai, and that's where I started my career. Very interesting couple of years there. It was a global consulting firm. I traveled to maybe 15 odd countries, spent a lot of time in Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asia, and typical work, strategy consulting, private equity due diligence, but sort of gave me the exposure that I really needed there, and was able to sort of save enough money to then be able to take a risk and start my first company, which was Connect to Teach. uh, Ran Connect to Teach for about 2 years. It was a We were solving uh, we building software solutions for higher education, like universities or a lot of the new age higher education companies that were coming up, more in the recruitment space. So almost like an Upwork for higher education, most focused on the UK and the US markets. Ran that for about 2 years, 2.5 years, and then uh, a couple of things happened in my life. That business was not scaling to my expectation, and my co-founder at that time and I had very different ambitions from the startup. She was a decade older, family business background. She would have been happy with a like profitable, small scale, recurring business. Whereas my at 24, my ambitions were very, very different, especially coming from IIT and seeing what was happening around me in the world of technology and how fast companies were scaling. Um, and so I sort of moved out of there. My fiance was in the US. I was still trying to figure out what I want to do next. So she had completed her MBA. She was going to SF, and which is where you mentioned I went to Berkeley, right? So I decided to also, at that time, at least think that we can solve the. I can solve one part of my life. I can at least personally be closer to my partner. So I decided to do my MBA, apply to, mostly West Coast schools, and got through Haas. So the idea was to go to Berkeley, spend some time in Silicon Valley, try to figure out what I want to build next there. And COVID happened, so I changed my plans, delayed my MBA by a year, and fortunately, at that time when I was thinking about what I can do in that 1 year, VC seemed like a great option, and an opportunity with Bessemer came about. So I joined VC with a mindset of being able to see other industries, being able to understand from a VC lens what companies, how companies raise and stuff like that. But most importantly, build a founder network of my own. I really wanted to see other people's journey, learn from them. So VC for me was a perfect place to sort of do all that. So did VC for a year, and uh, you know towards the end of my journey, I found like the manufacturing space was very interesting, wanted to sort of explore it further. So I did not tell my partner that I'm doing all this. For her, I was going to come back to Berkeley in 6 months. We'd set up our house, etc. there. So I started exploring this manufacturing space. We figured out some problems, built some prototypes, got very good traction, and then I told her that, hey, I want to build this, and I want to build this in India. And then she told me that if you can raise some money, then we'll talk about it. And then that's how sort of sources started.
Got it. So after VC, right? What make you come back in second innings as a founder? You could have continued longer as a VC, build more, social capital as well as personal financial capital for yourself, and then thought
Yeah.
of being a founder.
Yeah. Number one, I think I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and that was never a question in my mind. So I always knew that I'll go back to entrepreneurship. It was, I think, the first experience tells you, and I got into that experience very young. I had a year and some months of total work experience. So I did not know how grueling it was. I did not know how much time it takes. I was very like captivated by, stories in the media, right, about how, companies quickly become, scale and stuff like that. So I think one thing that I learned was that it's a 10-year journey and you have to be really sure of where you want to spend your time. So I wanted to take some time to figure out where that, that what that industry is going to be. Second, the skills that you learn in VCs are not really applicable to what you will do as an entrepreneur. And that became very like clear to me very quickly. It was clear to me when I did consulting because none of what I did as an entrepreneur uh, outside of like maybe thinking a little bit or you know being able to present the business well, etc., are applicable. The for 0 to 1, 1 to 100, it's a very very different skill set. So I knew that if I continue longer in VC as a skill set, I'm probably not building anything towards my startup. If it was an operating role, probably I could have taken some learning back and applied. So, VC for me was always an intermediary step in that way. I wanted to, as I said, build a founders network, figure out a space or spaces that I'm finding interesting and just understand from a VC perspective why some businesses get funded and some don't. And 1 year was enough for me to do that and to, at least know all the VCs, etc. And the market sentiment that time was really good. So I felt like the right time to start entrepreneurship.
Got it. And what are the mistakes that you documented from your earlier venture that you are not making right now in sources?
Yeah, I think the first big part of it is how you build your founding team and your co-founders, right? So the first time I was very hasty. It was as connected to someone through some friends, and I mean the way I decided to go into it was not very thought through. I think this time I was very, very thought through. So I wanted a founding team which was completely complementary in skill set, so that Vikas, my other co-founder, he's been a product manager, so he controls product, he controls product calls. Mayur is a software engineer, he controls coding, everything, they do infrastructure, etc. goes to him, and I will just trust his judgment on it. So we move really, really fast in that way. And and also the second part is ambition, right? Like, uh, you should be equally ambitious about your business and what kind of business you want to build. So if it's a large scale business, all of you should want to build a large scale business. And as soon as you take VC money, right, like, you have decided a trajectory to follow for your business. You can't then say that, okay, I don't want to grow this rapidly, or I want to probably build this a different way. You have to build it in that way. So ambition and complementary skill sets was really important, and that's one of the core learnings that we applied. Second was to not being married to a solution, right? Like, in my first stint, we were like, okay, this is what we're building, and we just kept sort of building that, tried to kept pushing that, rather than ever taking a step back and saying that, hey, this doesn't work. Like, maybe the solution is a problem, maybe the problem is also not rightly identified. So this time we were like, okay, we will identify a space. We want to build something in manufacturing. It's a, and we'll talk a little bit about, I think, why manufacturing. But we got married to this space. We said we'll build in manufacturing, and then we just iterated on what approach would work best. And SaaS was also an outcome of that. We did not start thinking that, okay, let's build a SaaS business for manufacturers. We got married to this space, and then sort of kept iterating. And then third is like hire very good people, so L1 teams, etc., and decentralized decision making. So that is one thing that I keep constantly applying, and my role as a founder, I see, is to keep the company well capitalized, so I can bring great talent and then give that talent sort of the right decision making power, so they can do their job well. So that is another thing that we didn't do really well in the first startup. And think tech first, right? I think when there are two three business people trying to solve a problem, you always sort of first, and in India it's very easy to put people on the problem, right? It's like, people are cheap in India. So I think that's one thing that we didn't do really well. We ran it like very, very operationally. We never thought about, our solutions were never tech first, and that's because most of the solutions were coming from non-technical people. So now we sort of make sure that tech has a seat at every table in terms of when we're solving a problem. Even if if you're solving like customer acquisition, tech will come up with 10 sort of automations that you will probably not even think about. Your solution will be keeping a 4 people team to do that.
And what are the mistakes that you see SaaS founders make and other founders make while you observed and evaluated them as a VC at Bessemer?
So I think one thing that I talk about my learnings as a VC was that and this you'll hear from a lot of entrepreneurs that VC don't know any, VC don't understand this, VC don't understand. The I think that has to be just accepted as a matter of fact. Like, a person like me sitting there at Bessemer, I personally cannot know 100 industries. I cannot associate with 100 problems. So you have to go in knowing that this guy doesn't understand it, right? And it's okay for him to not understand it or her understand it, and then you have to sort of explain it that way. So, and especially in SaaS, right, when you're building, let's say, for insurance or for like like manufacturing, which is an unsexy industry, I know for a fact that I'll go talk to a VC and they will never would have stepped into a factory also. It's very, very rare that I come across a VC who's probably has any relationship with manufacturing, or maybe it doesn't happen very often. And as I start pitching to, let's say, global investors, that will never happen essentially. So, how do you sort of, I think that is one part where I saw that a lot of pitches wouldn't, communicate that very well. As a consumer, it's still easier to relate to a value proposition. So it's easier for consumer tech startups, I think, in that sense. But for SaaS, I think it's very, very important to explain the problem and figure out what will it take for that guy to be interested. And at Bessemer, at least, we were very, very metric driven, right? And I think we published like a good, better, best of SaaS, global SaaS out there. So pretty much that's how I'm going to evaluate. So there were companies in oil and gas. I have no idea about oil and gas, but if it hits couple of those metrics, right, I am intended to learn more about the company. So that, I think, was one thing that I felt was missing. when startups would pitch SaaS companies especially.
Got- And you know, from a VC lens, once you are now evaluating jumping back onto entrepreneurship, what are the key criteria for you while selecting a market and selecting a problem?
Yeah. I think the TAM or just the total addressable market or just the space should be large. Like it should be large for you to keep innovating. And I think the VC perspective there is that if the space is large, you'll figure out your positioning within the market. You have places to pivot and figure out your own selective positioning. So that was one thing that was always in my mind, that I have to go after a large problem, and in an evolving market it's always better to go into an evolving market. So manufacturing at least was both of these. So supply chains were shifting, China plus one. COVID had really changed how people thought about supply chain, and India was, or Bangladesh, Vietnam were some of these emerging geographies, right? And supply chains were not that streamlined in these countries, and still aren't, right? Still, if you go, place an order in China, even though you don't know the language, even though you don't, I mean, they'll give you a very good user experience as an importer, right? But in India, in Vietnam, the markets are very, very opaque. They haven't been solved. So manufacturing was a large problem in general, and India was evolving, or at least trying to be, and people were looking at India now as a sourcing destination. So large market, and then a lot of unsolved problems. So when we went into this market, we just saw problems and problems, and they were very, very hard problems. Like like how fact like this supply chain is very, very complex, and so we thought, there's multiple places where we could see that tech can play a role in streamlining it. So this market really lend itself to tech innovations in that sense. Yeah. And I became a fan of unsexy markets at Bessemer. I felt like, everybody's thinking about creator economy, or what's the next sexy. And that's how a lot of founders also start. That's how I also, frankly, started thinking about new ideas, like what's the new sexy thing out there, right? But as I was looking at a lot of business at Bessemer, I found that there were a lot of these founders building in very unsexy spaces, Detect Technologies, for example, is one company that I really, really liked at my Bessemer days, building for oil and gas. And those business very, very strong business fundamentals. Not very, a lot of people are competing in those spaces, and it gives you a lot of time to build something of value to your customers. You're not always chasing numbers. You rather, like, you get enough time to build core solutions. So I really, you know like that about manufacturing as well. It was hard, very unsexy, and uh, uh, and one last thing that I really liked was when I went and met these factories, like the perception that I had and everybody had about manufacturers was like a Lalaji type of company. Nobody cares about technology. But when I actually went on ground, I met, the second generation, everybody studied abroad, or, has gone to a good university. They're ambitious. They don't want to run it like their fathers, and they are, demand first in their mindset. They want to give a good user value proposition to the end customer, good experience to the end customer, compared to the previous generation where they were very good, I would say, operators, taskmasters, very, they'll know accounting really well, they'll know where every money is going. That's not the current generation. They are not like that. They don't think like that. So I saw that as a big change as well when at least I was meeting customers. So a lot of these different things sort of came about when we were selecting the space we want to go after.
So, how many customers you met before you finalized sources?
Hmm. So I had a Notion document, and we were very, very methodical. And this is one of the reasons why I think one of the earlier investors invested, because we literally opened our Notion. There were like hundreds of notes. So we probably met 90 to 100, like ballpark 100 factories before we started. And in some of these factories, we spent 2 weeks, 3 weeks shadowing like the owners, just seeing how they work. So a lot of time like spent in factories, and we also went to different geographies. So we spent time in Panipat, which is a city close to Delhi, like small export hub, and then we went to Muradabad, which is a metal handicraft hub. Then we went to Jaipur, which is handicraft, but plus a little bit of apparel. So we try to also cover, different micro segments in terms of category, so that we know that the problems, or at least high level, are these industries, people, their processes, their workflows, or are they similar. So yeah, I think we met a lot of, so 4 or 5 months. I think we just spent time meeting factories. We did nothing else in that time.
Dear listeners, before we dive further into the podcast, I would like to welcome Prashant Ganti, Head of Product Management at Zoho Payroll and Zoho Books. Prashant, what is your long term vision for Zoho Payroll?
Thanks, Siddharth. So for us, right, at Zoho, everything we invest for the long term. That includes Zoho Payroll. We will continue to invest in R&D, push innovations in the payroll domain, and what we will also do is payroll straddles both HR and finance, and many times what we see many of these problems as situated applications like payroll or something that just addresses one domain. What we have observed is all these applications have wide implications. All these departments like payroll have wide implications across the organization. So we will continue to ensure that the data residing in payroll applications disseminate across the organization and help with decision making across various departments. Furthermore, we are emerging as a payroll platform. We encourage our customers to solve problems that we ourselves have not imagined. And we are also seeing if payroll plays a larger role in the ecosystem. Like, for example, payroll, we connect with banks. Going forward, we might talk to insurance providers, with the regulatory authorities. So end-to-end automation across the entire ecosystem. So that's our long-term plan for payroll.
Thank you, Prashant. Dear listeners, you will find more about Zoho Payroll in the show notes. Now, let's further continue with the podcast. So, you quit your job at Bessemer in April 2021, right? So,
Yeah.
so after April, how much time did you spend in this activity?
So right, I think April for like March 31st was my last day. April 2nd, I was at a factory because while I was quitting, I'd already figured out that I want to, explore this manufacturing space. So April 2nd, Vikas and I were at our first factory. We went to Panipat. My in-laws live in Panipat, so we literally spent I think we spent a full month there. And then we came back to Delhi. Then we went to Jaipur. Then we went to Muradabad. And this was all throughout the second wave of COVID, that we were doing all of this, right? So we did not lose momentum. Like, we just kept meeting factories. And I think by May, mid June, we had sort of narrowed down on the path that we want to take. And we wanted to be like a SaaS enabled marketplace. So we at least figured out that, there's a SaaS problem that we want to solve first. And then we spent another month or so just pitching a prototype. So we built a prototype. It was a Figma prototype, no tech, no coding involved, but it was literally, you could look at it and you will pitch it to you in a way that you'll, as a manufacturer, you will not know that I'm pitching to you a prototype, right? We'll pitch it like a ready product. So we spent like the next 1 month just pitching it to customers, and our core this thing was simple. Like, we'll ask for money after every pitch. That, if you pay us X amount, we'll sort of we'll build it for you and we'll give it to you. And when we saw that a lot of customers were happy to pay us for that prototype, is when we realized that, okay, there's a real need that we figured out. And then we started sort of fundraising, building the actual product. So the time was spent in figuring out what to build, and a lot of time spent in also validation of, okay, this is the right thing to build first, and people will buy it, pay for it. It really drives value.
Got it. And during that phase, when you were meeting 90 to 100 customers, right, in the 4 months starting April 2021, uh, what time did you start your fundraise?
So we started our fundraise, I think, in sometime in June. After we'd done a lot of these pitches, people had said they'll pay us, right? And as I said, like, I had July I was supposed to start business school, so I was sort of on a timeline from that perspective, to just basically be able to take that call. So June is when we started our fundraise, and fortunately, that time it didn't take us long to close our seed. It probably took us like 10 to 15 days to
Wow.
put together around. It was quick, and that time was also very different compared to now.
So in the entire 15 days, you would have pitched to how many VCs?
I pretty much pitched to almost all of them. Like, I 10, 15 maybe. I did like ICs every day. Like I was basically doing 2 to 3 ICs a day also. So I think one of the things I did was I put myself on a time. I said I'll wait for 2 weeks. I am not going to go and then get feedback and then wait, because I think the best thing you can do as a founder is time it. If you time it, VCs also time it. Otherwise, it can go for a infinitely long time, right? And nobody wants to take a decision. So I kept myself on a very tight timeline, and I did like pitches every day. For the next, I think after a week we knew like we had started getting term sheets in, and next week was just probably putting together like the round, like who like just between different term sheets that we had. So I
So how
think
many term
after
sheets?
1 week we had like three, and then some were evaluating, and yeah.
Got it. And how did you finalize who to take money from among those three?
Um, I think, like I heard, I took a lot of founder feedback. So thanks to Bessemer, I knew some founders, right? And so I took feedback on funds, and then I had some people who could give me good feedback, like authentic feedback. So I mean, every fund will connect you to founders, but I had my own network who would. Sort of also, I knew that they would give me genuine feedback. So it was mostly founder feedback that I took. And in terms of like value add, etc., etc., I thought like manufacturing is such a, I don't know which VC will be able to help me sort of figure this out, right? So my thing was that I want patient investors, I want good people to partner, and I heard great feedback about both my investors from a bunch of entrepreneurs, and especially people whose company didn't work. So I asked feedback from people who couldn't sort of build it out, had to shut their companies, and the response that the VCs gave them and how they were with them through that journey, right, of multiple pivots, and then maybe something didn't work. So that was very telling.
Got it. So out of the three term sheets, I believe one was from Bloom, the other was from Alpha Wave Incubation, right? So you combined both
Yeah,
of them
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
to.
So that, yeah,
Uh,
that took some engineering, but yeah, we were able to combine, and we also, yeah. So that was the mechanics that went on in the second week. First week was just me pitching to everyone. I did not like I was not very selective in that. I pitched to almost everyone I knew, and then funds start approaching you when you're in the market. So I pitched to everyone who approached me as well.
got it. Uh, and during that phase, what are the preparations that you had done, right, which can be useful for founders listening to this podcast, so that you don't have to
Yeah.
take 1 week to prepare or 2 weeks to prepare what VCs have asked you.
So I think Siddharth, that might be very different now, because the now when num- it's a hard question, because um at that time the pace at which investments were being done and the evaluation criteria were very different from what you will see now. I think, and I'm speaking to a lot of founders. So now that the market has slowed down, people want to dive in more, and there's the competition within the VCs has slowed down a little bit in that sense. So people have more time. With us, like, number one, we were pre-product. So I was very clear that I don't have a product, I don't have customers. So I need to some, and people don't believe that you can make money from SaaS in India, and a lot of people didn't believe us, right? In fact, Matrix uh, literally didn't believe that we would be able to charge our customers money, and then when they saw that we actually were able to charge them money, they came in the next round, right? Uh, but uh, so I basically, the preparation I did was that I was thorough with like all my pitches. So all the customer pitches that I did, right, I would record them, and I couldn't have charged money to them, but I literally gave everybody access to recordings. I said, like, these are these 10 customer recordings that you can listen to, and then you can see that my prototype works for them, and yeah. So that's the preparation that I did. And but if you are pitching at a different stage, you probably would have more metrics, numbers. I didn't have any metrics, so I what I wanted to give to VCs was customer validation, that hey, we've done our research, this is the prototype that we are building, this is the product that we will be building, and we know for a fact that this will sell. And these are some conversations that you can listen to ascertain if it sells or not. And then people had questions about industry, etc. So wherever we had spoken to a lot of industry experts, so we had, you know we very freely shared those numbers, that you can talk to these guys, and they might be able to explain to you the industry. Uh, yeah, so that was the preparation that we did.
So projections, everything was handy with you when you went into fundraise.
Again, this could be different now, but at that time, I did not have any projections.
Okay.
And I think only one VC asked me for projections, and I remember thinking that he's not going to invest because we were pre-product. So, asking for projections for a pre-product company 5 year out, yeah, I'm just going to do some art there. And I felt like, that like almost all VCs, like no, 99% of the VCs didn't ask me for it. Only one or two asked, and the moment they asked, I knew that they would not invest. They're not right for the stage, right? Because it was pre-product. So I think everybody should understand that it'll take 6 months to maybe figure out PMF and then to scale. And a lot of good VCs also understand that you might need to pivot, right? So at the seed stage, I think the right partners for you are people who understand that. At the same time, you might not have options to choose, right? So you should like do your duty of pitching to everyone that you can, including angels and stuff like that.
And once you had like how did you and Sajith connected? And that I think that's a very interesting story. And how did you find like that you both want to partner with each other?
Yeah, so I had met Sajith. So Sajith and I had been connected by chance like a couple of times. So one of my partners from Parthenon, and this was after, like I deferred my B school and I was figuring out what to do for that year, right? So Amit and Sajith knew each other from I think I am Bangalore. They were same batch, I think so. And Sajith was trying to find somebody for Leverage Edu. For leverage. Yeah. So Amit recommended that you should talk to this guy. He's done Parthenon education. He was an entrepreneur. Like he's like might be a good candidate. So Sajid sort of that was the first time we were connected, and I was actually considering it, but then I'd gotten Bessemer, and I felt like I wanted to not do education for a bit. Um, and then when I was at Bessemer, we made an EdTech thesis, and Sajith had also had a EdTech thesis which he had like sort of published, etc. Right, and Bloom had done a fair amount of EdTech investments in seed stage. So we reached out to Sajith and we'd shown him our thesis and just exchange notes. And so when I was starting to raise, I reached out to Sajith. I knew him a little bit, and that's how we'd been connected. Another side story is that Sajith had met Anirudh, who's my other investors, at one of their parties in Bangalore. And this was before I'd even, this was when I was just exploring ideas. And Anirudh had told him that, a friend of mine is, exploring ideas and you should maybe consider him as an EIR, smart guy, might do something in life. And so Sajid had heard about me from there as well.
Got it. No, Sajid is a wonderful person, and it's because of that,
Yeah.
we are also partners in your journey. Uh,
I'd actually asked Sajid for an internship at Bloom. For not like after he approached me for his portfolio company, I told him that, hey, I'm more interested in VC. And he straight away
okay,
said no to me. He said, Divyanshu, we are not hiring. We get too many applications, this and that. And I said, okay. He was very straight up about it.
okay, awesome. So one rule is which I have figured out is when meeting with people in VC industry, look for people who are more straightforward rather than people who keep on beating around the bush.
Yeah,
Do
yeah,
value your
for sure.
opinion as straightforward.
Yeah, definitely. And I took feedback from every pitch. So after every pitch, I took feedback that, okay, this was not clear to this guy, or this was not clear to this guy. And so I had like some 20 versions of my pitch. And every pitch, changed something about how I was explaining a certain concept. And I think a good thing that I learned from some founders would pitch to us, like you can actually, a lot of VCs, you can ask them about if they have a thesis or how well they know a space. So you should have, if somebody is already invested in this ecosystem, you don't need to like go through like every minute detail, right? So then spend time on the right pieces of it. And every VC comes with baggage. I think that is one thing that founders should probably. I understood it because I saw that at Bessemer. Every VC has baggage. Like they will try to connect you to some portfolio company that they have seen, and that has nothing to do with you. That has nothing to do with what you are building. But it's a complex. Like as a VC, also you're making a very complex decision based on like very limited data points, right? So That's how they think about it. So you should be probably know like what their portfolio companies are, and if you know what you're going to be pegged against, right, you can sort of prepare a little bit better.
Got it. And let's dive more deep into the product, right? Once you have identified manufacturing, once you identified that, uh, you know, uh, SaaS is a tool to help you earn trust of manufacturers. SaaS also, there are 100 problems to solve for manufacturers in SaaS, right? How did you identify the problem that you are solving right now?
Yeah. So I think the decision. So we had broadly, I could have solved two problems for them, right? Like I could either be in their sales and marketing side, or I could be in their manufacturing, like core production side. Our basic learning was that they like ERPs have been around for a while, right? So there was a lot of baggage of legacy tools. People had tried to implement them. It had taken them years, and if you talk to somebody and you tell them that you're bringing a new ERP, right? They're just scared. They're like, this will just eat up 2 years of my time and nothing will fucking happen. So we realized that there's a lot of baggage there. On the sales and marketing side, nothing had ever been built. Nobody had actually built a tech stack for their front end, right? Second was that front end appeals to people more. So if you go talk to a factory owner, right, they are okay. They're like, I'll build it, right? Production ho jayegi. Like, selling and COVID, because of COVID, how people were buying was slightly changing, and nobody was coming and meeting in person anymore. So everything was happening virtually. So that gave us like a clear indication that, people are more excited about this part of the system, and we have lesser baggage to deal with. uh, I am not going to be pegged against 100 systems which have failed, and they've failed because they're actually not built for India. They're like really, really clunky, etc. So I can definitely build something better there, but this just seemed like a easier way to acquire customers and take something new to them, which they would not sort of have seen before. In a space which is also changing for them, because everybody was trying to sort of adapt to new ways of selling digital, etc.
And
So
can
yeah,
you
so that's
explain
how we picked that.
what do you mean by front end, right, here? Like,
Yeah,
because our
as in
audience are
front end,
completely
as in
new to
like,
manufacturing.
yeah. So basically, the way our industry or the manufacturer that we work is simply, it's a very design. We work in design oriented categories. So we work in lifestyle categories, which could be home products, furniture, home textile, rugs, carpet, cushions, gems and jewelry, apparel, or and so the way like this industry works is that as a consumer, you are always going to these platforms. When you're going to buy things, you're always looking for something new, right? And trends shift very fast. So a lot of the manufacturers have to like constantly build new products and then try to market them to their customer base as well as new customers. New customers, they would typically go to trade shows, etc., which now wasn't happening. So they were trying to basically do more email marketing or reach out to the people they met before. And so every manufacturer will build thousands of products every year, and then they're trying to like basically build custom catalogs. And let's say if there's a rug buyer and you build 10 different categories, there's no point setting a rug buyer like let's say 10 different categories. You want to send them rugs and you want to send them customized for them, because these are large B2B contracts. So you don't want to be like sending a 10,000 page catalog and then so that took a lot of time. So we realized that out of all the inquiries that were coming to these people to show products, they were only being able to get to 20% of those inquiries, and the rest will be delayed to next month, etc., etc. So that was a low hanging fruit for us in terms of front end. That like we want to help you give a better user experience to any customer that you're meeting at a trade fair or meeting online, and that is the part of the problem we solve. So anything pre-sales, like post sales is when you actually you order your raw material, you start building products. So we uh, currently what all we've built is on the pre-sale side. So we have tools for them to reply to inquiries faster, do invoicing, quotations. There are a lot of complex calculations that they need to do when sending quotations to buyers. So a manufacturer, for example, that used to take 7 days to build a customized catalog according to a buyer need, now can do it in literally 10 minutes. And they don't even have to, number one is they didn't have a digital system to keep their products, right? So one, we digitize that. Second is they can literally just upload a PDF, and a buyer typically sends you a PDF. They call it a mood board to then give you an idea of what they're looking for. They can upload a PDF and we'll just automatically create a catalog for them. and so there the journey starts, and then there's a longer quotations, etc. Previously, when they don't have a digital system, nobody's maintaining excels in India. They're constantly calling people in their factory, hey, what was the material in this, and they're constantly calculating cost of products again and again. They didn't have a centralized way to calculate cost. So let's say your price of a raw material changes, there's no way for them to change it across all the products. They would have to literally calculate that cost again. So we automated that part, and now we have a bunch of tools for them to take to trade shows where you would see manufacturers with like piles of paper, because they'll take like 500 products to the trade show, and then every product they would have information for. So if somebody selects something, they'll flip through those pages, give that information, and then after the buyer goes, they have to consolidate all of that, and they would like basically carry notebooks. They would write notes in the notebook, paste the card of the buyer. So we automated all of that. So there are QR codes across their showroom. Buyer comes, they can scan products automatically. It creates like a catalog which needs to go to the buyer after the show. So all of those things that is what we're solving on the front end, for them to give a better user experience to their customers.
Yeah. And in which month you had your first paying customer?
So we started, our fundraise happened like, by the, we started like, I think the first team member joined us in August. So August, September, we were building the product, testing with some early customers. November is when the first customer paid us. So yeah, so 2 to 3 months into building the product, and that was by chance. Like we like went to a customer, we raised a pro forma invoice, and they just transferred money. So we said we realized that okay, maybe the product is at a level that people will be ready to pay for it now. Before that, we were just building and taking it to a place where people. So that first customer paid, and then we said that okay, now we can maybe charge people money. So then we started charging customers, and then trying different pricing models, etc. for the next few months.
And what was the first payment, if you remember?
I think it was 30,000 rupees, so something like that.
And
Uh,
once you had figured out, right, the customers are paying 30,000, so you repeated and scaled that model from there on.
I mean, we had to sort of understand how to price it. So we went through different pricing strategy. We said, should we price it? Uh, number, I think the first thing is that you need to decide whether you want to charge monthly, you want to charge annually, right? And that choice we took very early on, that we will only charge annually, because number one, we want to build a SaaS enabled marketplace. So for us, SaaS is a way to get customers in. We do, charging a Indian factory owner monthly is the worst thing you can do to yourself. And it's like collections will become a huge problem in India. You just keep following up, right? So we said, okay, even if we get paid lesser, right, we'll charge upfront, right? And so that call we took very early on. We did not give any of our customers, and we tested it. So we initially had like quarterly payment, semi like annual payment, and then we had like a only an annual plan, right? And we saw that it doesn't really change our conversion rates, because we were not charging exorbitant prices. Um, so that decision we had to take, and then of course the pricing model. What do we charge on? Do we charge on the basis of products they keep? Do we charge on the basis of users that use our platform? And so those were some of the decisions that we had to take before we could scale it. And even pricing, we went through iteration. So when I presented my first deck, to like when I was pitching to investors, the price point that I'd written on that deck was that people will pay 12,000 rupees annually for this. And I'd written that I will not, this is not a SaaS business, we'll just, this is our hook, and then we'll build something else on top of it. But 12,500 is what people will pay. But when we went to the market, we don't have a 12,000 rupee price point now. Like the minimum is 30,000, and we were selling it for 70. We sold it to for 1 lakh. We sold it to a customer for 1,80,000 also. So we kept sort of increasing our price point and seeing where, to what point can we take it. And now we are at a point where there's some customers who are happy to pay us $5,000. We're talking to some larger factories who are happy to pay $10,000, which is a price point we didn't think we would ever get to, right? So pricing is an iterative strategy, and we kept increasing and experimenting, and we always thought that let's charge, and Indian user will always ask for discount, so we can then discount it and sell it to them.
But did you face like building feet on the street sales team as a challenge?
Yeah. So I think most difficult part was figuring out a scalable GTM in this segment, because we were selling to customers in towns like Mirzapur. We literally have customers in Mirzapur, Badohi, Varanasi, and we have like people in Panipat. So very, very tier two towns. Uh, and the we realized early on that this is not a product. They're not like our sales. If we try to do digitally, right? Um, it becomes very hard. Like people don't convert digitally. This is a segment which is burnt by technology so many times that they will not trust you if you're not, if they don't have a face for it. And I don't blame them, because if you go to a tier two town like Panipat, right, people are constantly coming and trying to fool these people. Like people will sell them websites for 5 lakh rupees. People will take money to implement ERP and never come back again. So almost every manufacturer had that perception that you'll take my money, you'll run away. And in tier two towns, these are the best businesses to milk for money, right? So, and everybody tries to do that. So trust, and our whole premise was that we want to build trust. So we realized that we have to go in person and sell. And then building teams in Panipat, Badohi, Mirzapur, super hard to find talent, super hard to relocate talent. So that was definitely a very, very hard part, and we're still figuring it out. How to sort of build teams across these small, small cities and then run that feet on street operation. One thing I didn't do is shy away from it. A lot of people shy away from going feet on street, right? And I think if anything, like if Baiju's and like all of these people have been able to scale feet on street to some level. So one thing I didn't do was shy away from it. I said that whatever it will take us to sell it, we'll do it. We'll do that. So yeah, we're still trying to figure out how to scale the C2 feed. Like we've not hit it out of the park, but that's like one of the most challenging things. But in India, like for SaaS companies, this might be the like at least for this segment, this is the right way to do it.
Got it.
So we
And
spend
and
time
what
in figuring out who that talent moat is. Should we hire from India Mart or should we hire from a different kind of company? And sorry, one more thing that you have to decide is what is your model, right? Like there are some companies where the sales guy will also be the customer success manager in a way. They'll also handhold the customer to onboarding to, and then almost be an account manager. And then there are companies where you want to like basically say that okay, this guy will sell, this guy will handhold. So we've gone through those iterations as well for the first 6-8 months to figure out what is that model for us. Should we keep it with the sales guy? Should we keep it separately? Uh, so these are some of the decisions we have to take.
and what are the total number of customers till now?
So this month, I think we'll close with about 400 customers. So we really started scaling our sales uh, from January. So by till January, we had like maybe 5-7 customers, and then January onwards, we started putting the first salespeople on ground. And so now we'll close this month with about close to 400 customers. Every month, we're acquiring about 80 customers, paid customers, not unpaid customers,
Got it. And the average price point you are now charging is $500, which now as high
close
goes
to
up to
$500.
5,000.
Yeah, so 5,000, we are just starting to sell to bigger factories now. And that is a change that we've just done, because I think we kept building for small factories. And in the beginning, whenever a large factory would approach us, we would not engage that much. We would, because we thought like the implementation cycle will be too large. And anyways, we have to build a marketplace on top. And probably these smaller factories will be easier to sort of bring onto the marketplace. They have more, unutilized capacity. But now, like, people started approaching us, and we started seeing that okay, the price points at which they are happy to pay for the product are quite high. So this quarter now we are going to sell, like we're basically selling to a couple of large companies and trying to figure out if it can fit in the same SaaS operational model, or do we need a different kind of model? Do they need different kind of features? uh, because the scale changes, right? Like they will have 20 people using your software. They'll have like hundreds and thousands of SKUs compared to like 10,000, 5,000 too small. So we're trying to figure that out. But yeah, that's something that we want to test out in the next few months.
And can you share your thoughts on the marketplace that you have built? What are the things that marketplace solves, and what is the current traction that you have been able to get in marketplace?
Yeah. So marketplace is very new for us. So our vision from day one has to be become an operating system for factories. Operating system for us means that tech will be our mode. So we'll build a tech system which runs everything in their factories, right from sales and marketing to then get into like even the production life cycle. And then on top of this, we will add different layers of services. So the options that we had were to either start with procurement, like help these factories procure raw materials, uh, or get into their front end, which is like helping them fill their capacity. We decided to start with the front end, but overall, I think our vision over the next 5 years is to have all of these pieces built out, right? And we get approached by a lot of people who want to sell to our customers, and again, I think the one of the things that we've solved is selling in these geographies. So if we can make a large enough network, we can open that for other people to sell their services. On the marketplace front, I think what we're typically solving is that every buyer and mid-sized buyer, be it an e-commerce player, be it a retailer. Let's say a retailer in sitting in GCC with 20 stores, or being in the US with 30 stores, 20 stores, a furniture and home goods store, for example, will want to bring new products to market every few months. Uh, and that is where the challenge is, that you have trends which evolve constantly, and then you're always going out and trying to find these products and trying to bring them to market. And that is what we solve, because we have a SaaS platform which helps these manufacturers, you know, keep all the samples, etc. What we're now doing is giving that ability to these buyers to not just discover products with their themes. So let's say you bring a theme to me, I can actually show you 1,000 products which match it across categories, and then being able to procure that for you. So that is what we are building there. And the kind of traction we're getting is interesting, right? So the people, we're helping people launch new categories. So there's a client in Dubai, 20 stores. They've we're helping them currently launch like 5 new categories, which range from aroma oils to candle holders to bags, right? There's another customer that we're currently working with who wanted to launch ladies' bags, and they wanted to launch it in 2 months. So in 2 months, we're helping them launch 50 new SKUs across marketplaces. Again, it's a US sort of focused customer. So our value proposition that we're bringing to the buyers is that, hey, we have 20, 30 odd categories. Within each category, we have multiple price points at which we can help you procure multiple materials that our manufacturers work with, and we can help you expand categories, launch new products according to your themes very, very quickly. So currently we've just started it a month back, and we're still in the process of closing some initial orders. So working with about 5 odd buyers and trying to close out the first few orders here. And the plan is to scale across GCC over the next 3-4 months, and then launch in US early next year.
Got it. And which are the geographies the SaaS is present in right now?
In some, I think we're in 14 cities. So Delhi, NCR, Greater Noida, Panipat. Then we have like the whole UP belt. So Muradabad, we have Muradabad, Mirzapur, Badohi, Varanasi. That's the carpet belt. Then Muradabad is more metal handicrafts and some metal furniture, wooden furniture. Then we have the whole Rajasthan. So Jaipur, Jodhpur is a big geography for us. In South, we have Karur, we have Tirupur, and then we are expanding to Ludhiana right now, and expanding to some other geographies as well. So we are currently in the space, like we're trying to get to all Indian cities as soon as we can. So deploying teams there, and trying to build scalable systems like operational systems within the company to manage such a large feet on street team. And the one thing is that in tier two, the salespeople are your brand, right? Eventually, that those are the people that the customers will interact with for the first time. So building strong training mechanisms to refine them to be able to present the brand well to those customers. So those are some of the things that we're doing internally to scale the sales team.
Got it. And what is your path, right? Right now, you are at between 200,000 to $250,000 of ARR, right? What is your path to 1 mil ARR in how much point on time? And the bigger path to a, let's say, 10 mil ARR SaaS business in how much time?
I think so by next year, like same time next year, we should be like maybe July, we should be hitting $1 million ARR. Right now, we could get there faster, but right now we're conserving our capital, trying to spend it more on the marketplace front, which is a new 0 to 1 journey and expensive because you're doing it across multiple countries, etc. I think the part to 5-7 million in India is, we have a part to 5 and 7 to $7 million ARR in India. as we start selling to bigger factories where the price points are $10,000, $15,000. And as we build more modules, right, some of these factories we think that, can become like a $30,000 ACV type of a customer. Because as I said, we've only solved the front end right now. As the factory becomes larger, back end is actually even bigger problem, right? And so these factories are on their own telling us, and that's the good thing about unsexy industries. You almost, even if their Wi-Fi goes out, they'll call you. Even if they have a big problem, they'll call you. So you are the only tech company they know, essentially, and they'll come to you for every problem. So I think getting to these bigger factories will help us get to $5 million ARR over the next few years, and then expanding our offerings to Vietnam, Bangladesh, Turkey, some of these other geographies. So we're already sort of thinking that next year at least we'll start doing some GTM experiments across Vietnam and Bangladesh, and then as we sort of tailor the product to these geographies because there's a different language and etc., then we'll start sort of scaling those systems. The goal right now is to focus. I am at least trying to focus a lot of my energy on the marketplace front, which is a 0 to 1 journey.
Got it. And at what point of time you think, right, the marketplace can hit same a 1 million take rate, not the GMV, and similarly a 10 million take rate?
Too soon to comment, Siddharth, but at least hopefully same time next year we should be at a 1 million take rate. At least that is the goal we're trying to
Got
build
it.
towards.
Got it. And how are you thinking of scale right now at SourceWiz, right? What are the mechanisms in team building, in processes that you are building?
Yeah. So I think one of the things is that I am I have a very good L1 layer that I've built, right? So, for example, my SaaS business is led by a very close friend from IIT, same batch, trust him really well and very, very good at operations. So, uh, one idea is that I should not be the bottleneck for anything. So, decentralized decision making, and I have owners for everything and they are accountable. So, we said we have very, very strong accountability. We do like very stringent weekly reviews. We have every metric across every department that we need to review. So, if it's sales, every step of the funnel. There are weekly goals that we set for every step of the funnel. There are weekly initiatives that we plan, monthly initiatives that we plan, and then we track them, right? So that is, and then I don't have to go and get into minute details or micromanage. We do all of that in those reviews, etc., and then we sort of track them across months, and then have strong people and let them drive it, right? So you can't be everywhere, and you should not be the bottleneck. So that is one thing that I'm doing, like building strong leadership across different verticals. Um, Second, in terms of scaling, as I said, so we'll scale our sales team. But one of the things that I've observed with Indian companies, and is that when you scale feet on street, right, you lose control of quality very quickly, and that guy will go and present your brand in whatever way they feel fit. Eventually, my goal is to build trust with my users, right? So I don't want my brand to be misrepresented, or I would at least try to control mis-selling as much as possible. And that has happened with some edtech companies also that we see, right? That mis-selling at scale with feet on street happens. So we have just putting in very, very strong training mechanisms and making sure that number of processes to make sure that mis-selling doesn't happen, right? So that is another thing that we're doing on the sales side. And on the customer experience side, again, very, very stringent mechanisms. Like we have to onboard a customer in less than 10 days. So we go to the detail that, okay, if this is not hit, right? Like what happened to this one particular customer? Who was accountable for this customer? And to that level of detail. And then we're doing partnerships across different hubs. So um, a lot of SaaS companies, at least like when you think about marketplace and think about web, like you don't try to build a brand. That's not one of the things that you do, right? But we are partnering with almost all local organizations across all of these hubs. There are exporter organizations, so we partner with them. We've actually built some communication apps for some of them. So let's say there's a society in Panipat which has like some 200 exporters. So we built like an internal communication app for them, which is, and then we do events etc. with them. So build multiple services. We are sponsoring a very call it JPL. So it's a Jodhpur Exporter Premier League. So it's a cricket match with like some 200 exporters participating. So we're doing a lot of those regional partnerships with export associations, which is also helping us create a brand. So the idea is that when we go to a customer, they've heard about us, and that has actually started happening in a lot of these geographies now that we're and we're seeing that transition, right? Like in the beginning when we used to go to factories and when we were just experimenting, people will not let us enter. Like their showrooms where they keep their products, and these guys think that their products are their IP. So they will not let you enter their showrooms because they'll be like, you click a picture, give it to somebody, and this happens a lot in these cities, right? Like you will hear anecdotes like, people will make the driver follow the other factory owner to see which buyer they're going to meet, and like people will bribe the courier guy to bring samples to them of these other exporters so that they can offer the same product at a cheaper cost. So all of that happens, right? So it's a very trust deficit society, as I said. But now when we're going to people to bring them on marketplace, nobody has said us no. Everybody is happy to expose all of their products to us, be very transparent with their prices, and that kind of trust is what we want to replicate across other geographies as well.
Got it. And what are the unknowns in the business that you are still figuring it out?
Uh, so I think once we start executing manufacturing, right? So um, one of the things is that a lot of products in India are handmade. So uh, India is not known for a lot of consistency in their products, right? Um, Compared to China, which is very mechanized as a setup, right? So the products are going to get out with a certain quality fail rate, and it's going to be largely the same what you're expecting. In India, because like rugs are a lot of products are completely handmade, and a lot of and people come to India to buy handmade products. It's like a but quality there is a issue, and we still don't know how we would go about solving that to make sure that there's consistency in products that are being shipped out through our platform. So that's a bit of an unknown. It's an unknown because we've not executed many orders yet. So over the next few months, we have to figure that out. And then GTM on the US expansion piece, how like building that scalable way of acquiring these buyers across US and GCC. That's something that we're still working on. We have some initial, at least early adopters, but we haven't yet built a scalable mechanism. So how would that happen? What would the economics of that seem, right? Those are the biggest two unknowns that at least right now which scare me. Apart, I mean, these multiple otherwise unknowns that happen to us on an everyday basis that we have to just live with.
And how did the second round with Matrix happen for you?
So Matrix we pitched to them in our seed round, and as I said, like nobody believed that we would be able to charge factories, and they would pay even a single dime. And I kept in touch with them, like we would, every 2-3 months kept in touch with them. So around I think February, March, they'd reached out, and by that time we were closing in on about 100 customers. We had a part 200, so it like 3 months of sales. Every month we had grown, and customers were paying us, right? And we still have like very very good monthly active usage of our customer base. So we focus a lot on retention from day one, right? So I think that they just couldn't. I think the one key concern that they had that we wouldn't be able to do, and we sort of done that. So they came in and we sort of engaged with them from there. So we were not out in the market to raise funds. It was just we'd met them before. We'd liked the team. I think it's one of the strongest teams in B2B. Sudipto and Avnish, I mean, they're super knowledgeable. They've done B2B investments across almost every category. If you think about it, they've agri, um, they've op business. They've seen the breadth of stuff, right? Captain Fresh. So they've done it all. So they seemed very knowledgeable in that sense, and they were the one of the few investors who, from day one, at least told us that they believe in SaaS-enabled marketplaces, and I think they've had some success within their portfolio companies. So in that sort of alignment of vision, why SaaS first? And those were questions that we always had to answer, right? Like manufacturers wouldn't pay you. India is a dhanda first country. Why are you going after supply first? So when you have that kind of alignment, like it's good to get those kinds of partners in whenever you can.
Got it. So initial your first round, you selected Bloom because of the founder love they had in the ecosystem, right?
I spoke to founders who literally told me that no matter what happens, do not leave Bloom. Like when we had multiple term sheets, that choose between the others, but do not leave Bloom because they're just like some of the nicest people around the block, right? And uh, when I was, and the same I'd heard at Bessemer from other people, and I was very clear that at an early stage when I'm just starting out, things might change, and I have to get the most patient, the most loving people around me to go through those changes with me, and so yeah, so Bloom was the obvious choice there.
Got it. And Alpha Wave, because they had a strong GCC network, and Anirudh was a personal friend of yours.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
And how did you bring in angels in the first round and in the second round and microfunds like
Um,
us? What was your selection criteria for that?
Angels, I think the first round I brought a lot of SMB SaaS folks. So the Class Plus guys, Posist, and then couple of people from the industry. We have some angels like we have from Wayfair, etc. Because we always knew that at some point we would make that transition. Selection criteria was basically that, like I'm building an SMB SaaS company, so the Posist, Ashish Tulsian, and Mukul and Bhaswar, they've been quite good in terms of helping us figure out, as we scale initially, right? ClassPlus has a feet on street, for example. So in the early days, we've taken a lot of inspiration from that. Similarly, Posist, Ashish has given me a lot of words of wisdom around like like basically going all out to enable the customer to use your system, because giving technology is one thing, but we've worked a lot on onboarding, and I think a lot of the modes that we built are not just the product, it's like the whole process of onboarding the customer and like making the time to value short. Second round, again, when we were second round angels, uh, anyone, mostly people who had some form of US connect or international connect. So that was one of the criterias, and somebody who can help us in the buyer side. So more marketplace oriented people. First round, we were clear that it's going to be SaaS, and then now we're clear that it's going to be marketplace.
Got it. And what are the some 3 to 4 key things, right? And if you have to summarize your learnings for a founder today to build at least a couple of million ARR business, which you have extreme clarity now to do, right? To do's and not to do's.
Got it. I think first is that I think early customers are very, very important, right? So um just if you can find early partners in a large space where that they will at least help you get to a certain do that, and then listen to customer feedback very, very intently, right? Just do whatever it takes to enable them. So for example, one of the articles I wrote was before AI can solve it, let BHA, like bhai solve it, right? So for our customers, the biggest impediment was that moving from a legacy system to a new system, the time it takes for them to, let's say, onboard all of their products to the platform was humongous, right? And we knew that we would lose those customers, so we went all out. We said, like, literally just give us whatever you have. Like, we would just send people to their factories, take a pen drive, bring all the products, and then we were just figuring out how to onboard them. And now we have a onboarding setup. So second is that just go all out. Like, uh, building the product is just one part. Like, you need to understand every single roadblock that they will face in terms of using the product, and you need to solve for those, even if it's a manual intervention. Like, we had like interns and tons of interns, like literally sitting and doing data entry, and then slowly we've automated them. So you can't automate everything on day one, so do not be scared of operations. um, like when it comes to even SaaS implementation, right? It is, it might not be required in a lot of SaaS business, but in some like ours, like we realize that there are a bunch of operational things that we need to do, right? And when you're especially defining a category, uh, you want to make it as seamless for them as possible, because they've lived without your system for a long time, right? And there's not enough knowledge out there of needing a system or what kind of you know uh, delta it would drive in their business. So they're mostly coming to you for convenience, right? Like your early customers. So make it as convenient for them. And third is, yeah, I mean, I think for me it was, do not be scared of building like field sales. Like, a lot of people in the beginning told me that don't do field sales, and a lot of SaaS founders, by the way, hate field sales, right? Like, they don't like it. SaaS is usually thought of as a clean business to run in India, running an FOS. So I think as a founder, you should not create those boundaries for yourself. You should be flexible and just go with the whatever it takes mentality. If my customer wants to have a cup of tea before he signs a contract, that's the process you need to figure out, right? Like, you can't be choosy in terms of what is the right process to sell. Okay, I would love to sell it remotely. It doesn't matter what you like, frankly, right? So I think those are some important factors. And at least in micro communities, like in our case, there are very micro communities, right? And word spreads very fast. So customer experience is going to drive most of your business. Like, there are customers of ours who literally sit with us and say that, okay, these are 20 people I know. They'll call those people in front of us and give us those meetings. And that's because we have gone all out for them. Like, we haven't left any stone unturned to solve their problem. And we measure those things really, really intently. Like, time to value and time to customer, problem resolution, right? Um, yeah, I
Got it.
think those are two, three learnings. I don't know if I put them well.
Yeah. I think one thing which stands out for me, and I think I tell all other founders to learn from you, is somehow if you can share those early notes, right, make them some version of them public, it will be a lot of help to founders. That how you documented the first 90 to 100 the conversations on Notion, uh, right?
Yeah,
That also sets an example for your team how to listen and how to
yeah,
document your customer need.
yeah. And actually, it helps. Like, it helped us in our early VC conversations. I had a slide where, and actually, one of the VCs had given me this advice. We were pre-product, right? So we had a slide where I literally had a snapshot of that Notion with like all of the names of customers and the snapshot that we've spoken to 90 customers before we're coming to you. So we're not coming to you just with an idea that we think will work, right? So it helped. Like, I'll try and make it public.
Yeah. So thanks, Divyanshu. It's been wonderful, to have this conversation, to deep dive into your process of building SourceWiz and the experience that has gone into the do's and the don'ts to reach here.
Thanks, Siddharth. There's a lot for me to also learn, but I hope I am able to add some value to your listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved this conversation. I hope my listeners love too.
Perfect. Thanks, Siddharth. Thank you so much.